I have a small question. What are the reasons to learn Delphi, especially when you have so many solutions for creating desktop applications like WPF, oh dear, with the robust and comprehensive environment, or even solutions like Flutter, which now allows for desktop apps, or Electron, which I'm less fond of and is used by Discord. So in the bingo of languages or lousy solutions, I think you have a good score on all of that. Why Electron? First of all, Delphi, now you can do Windows, Mac, iOS, Linux, and Android. Same code base, identical compilation, and it continues to create executable compiled programs. So we have the best possible response times, since the compiler optimizes quite a few things. Well, it's not C, but it remains something quite low level. Once compiled and at execution. So with that being said, Pascal doesn't really have much to envy about C in terms of language. Now, Electron, which allows for multi-platform development, is a disaster in terms of resources, CPU, management, memory, and everything else. The slightest Electron application needs a powerful machine to run properly. And it's true that the transition of Skype to when Microsoft abandoned Delphi for Skype, when they bought it, basically they redid a complete version. Now, I'm not sure if it's Electron or something like that. The same goes for Office. It simplifies maintenance in terms of managing various and diverse versions. But it's a mess too. And things don't always work with the same response times as before. So, Sylvain, then, who's going to leave? Good evening. For me, the execution speed of the code that approaches C++, but with a classic graphical interface. That's kind of what Delphi is about. Afterwards, it's true that Flutter, yeah, why not? On the other hand, I'm not sure if it's truly compiled or if it's compiled and interpreted internally. It's a gentle mix, depending on the platforms we work on. WPF, Axe, and Sharp, we're not really sure if it's going to last, so I would be cautious with WPF because Microsoft tends to create something, then decide it doesn't work in 2 to 3 years, and then change it and discard it. The good old interfaces directly mapped to the APIs for Windows, which manage their components, are still the most reliable in the long term. The advantage is that we won't have to redo all the software every 2-3 years. Programs dating back to Delphi 1 made in 1995 continue to compile and run on recent versions, provided of course that certain things are adapted, particularly data access, which obviously has evolved over time. But here, clearly, for me, the comparison with other languages is not an argument against using Delphi, quite the opposite. And Embarcadero had fun doing this last year, or 2 years ago, I don't really remember. Some comparisons, having independent developers work on different technologies. And if you want to take a look at the results, they have started publishing things again. So feel free to take a look. They had Embarcadero MVPs work on Delphi C++ and things like that, as well as external contractors as freelancers on solutions like Electron and others. And the benchmarking we conducted is still very much in favor of Delphi, generally speaking, in terms of maintenance, code readability, speed, coding, and responsiveness in terms of the functionality of the thing. So clearly, Delphi remains at the top in terms of usage. However, indeed, in France, with the historical missteps of Borland, when they spun it off into a subsidiary called Inprise, and it was done in a hasty manner, and then there was a lull in promotion, and then in the uncertainty about whether it would last or not. So companies generally abandoned Delphi when Embarcadero took it over a little more than 10 years ago. Now it must be 15 years even. Well, we now have a company that indeed lives solely from that. Well, from Delphi, C++ builder and interbase, but which only lives from creating the thing and maintaining the tool and evolving it according to Windows versions and different OS. So there, on that side, the longevity is generally assured. And then regarding functionality, the language is simple to use, the environment is simple to use. You can create applications without coding anything, including in database management. So it's true that this aspect is actually quite fun. And if you take a look at the examples I've put on GitHub, then I find my window. As you are, I actually have a lot of demos on GitHub about this and a few on YouTube and others, but it's true that I've mostly put the examples on my channels. GitHub. And you say, hope, oh, this, no, there are quite a few repositories examples on this. With the downloadable evaluation version from Embarcadero, the community version, which is free, it gives a little idea of what can be done. And there we can really work on everything, web, mobile, so web even as a client application, since now we have Pascal transpilers to JavaScript. So with Passes2.js, we can create a program in Pascal just like we do for Windows and others, and compile it to transform it into an HTML page with JavaScript. So it's true that everything is done inside to simplify the work, and honestly, you won't want to leave it. I came back to it for the mobile part because I didn't want to keep struggling with Objective-C and Android when FireMonkey came out and was stable. And it's true that I do web as web and Delphi for everything else. So basically PHP, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and Object Pascal in Delphi. I don't need anything else to work and I don't appreciate a known one, and I don't appreciate a known one, and I don't appreciate a known one when I was doing freelance work, because I do it very rarely now. It's more than enough for me. And it's true that all the projects I've been doing for 25 years, when I needed to compile or do quick things, that's where I did it. But it was just to generate passwords for myself, a screen, copy-paste a button, something inside, and then it's done. So there, it's true that on Twitch, I started at the end of January last year, so it's been a little over a year. I've surpassed 500 hours of streaming. Well, 500 effective hours of streaming because I don't count the replays, the intro parts and others, where I leave a little time until I actually start. In my replays, I've surpassed 500 hours coming from Twitch. So from live coding and overall. There are still quite a few things on which I haven't coded much or where I do copy pasting. So it remains an easy to use development tool and a simple language to learn actually. So it's true that I would recommend it more for that. For people who don't know how to do computing, you can start with Python because Python is trendy, and that the national education has chosen Python, or those who are doing Python and want to create graphical interfaces, since we have tools in Delphi that allow interfacing with Python by importing Python in an executable program, Delphi, or by using Delphi to create user interfaces for Python programs. There are libraries for that in open source. It's true that everything can be done with that. And there, clearly when I make games, I write a lot of code, whereas in real classic Office applications for database management, the code, there shouldn't be much of it just for data entry. Basically, you set up the screens, you place the components, it automatically attaches to the data, and then it manages itself. So it's true that on that side, it remains quite simple to use and practical. Then, like everything, there are tons of languages, tons of solutions. There's also Windows, which allows you to do things more or less easily. I'm not a fan, neither of their pricing policy nor their operation, but it's an alternative also used in France. So it's a choice. Then if someone asks me in which language one should get into nowadays in France to find a job, I would say JavaScript and PHP. Death in the... But there are still people hiring in Delphi, especially service companies, because more and more, inevitably, there are many former developers. The approach of retirement is becoming a reality for quite a few. So at the moment, there are searches for successors for quite a few projects that are used in companies, in industry, or by software publishers. so there is a potential job market there. In France too, one should not hesitate. Even if it's not highly visible, there is demand. For me, Delphi remains a possible alternative in computer learning and in the development of the best general. The setup is still quite quick to use, and you can do a lot of little things in a few hours. And resell them when done properly, especially on platforms like Coda, Freelancer, and others. This allows you to be quite responsive when you have small, inexpensive requests to do things.